that I played music with for about 20 years. And when I opened my record store in Brandon, they were my first two employees. I'm talking about Brian and Kevin. And Kevin is right over there in the red. Yeah. All right. Here we go. This is how I met these guys and some of the stuff that happened to us. I met Brian while he was biting away at a hunk of Velveeta cheese like an apple. You guys must know Brian. He is a full-grown man now, a husband and a father, but I still picture him as a cheese-eating teenager in his mom's garage. He laughs when I bring up the cheese to him now. I first saw Kevin when he was playing in another band. He was almost completely naked as he dove off the stage and landed headfirst on a metal folding chair, busting his mouth open. A couple of weeks later, I was introduced to him in Brian's bedroom. I said, "Hey, I've seen you naked." And Kevin looked a little embarrassed. He was maybe 16 years old. I was 24. Kevin's mother is a dear woman. I still catch up with her now and then. She let me sleep on her floor and use her shower a number of times. For my first Easter in town, she gave me a basket of candy. My favorite Kevin story came from his mother's mouth after a particularly insane incident in New York City with a teenage Kevin involving drugs, a hooker, and a chest wound. I was debriefing Kevin's unbelievably patient mother, and she told me the tale of the first time young Kevin was left alone with a babysitter. The unequipped sitter took her eyes off baby Kevin for just a moment, and he disappeared. The panicked sitter searched the house. He was nowhere inside. The sitter looked out a window to see baby Kevin, stripped of his diaper, perched high in the branches of a tree. I think this incident set a template for much of Kevin's future behavior, nudity and danger. Brian and Kevin worked the first several months of the record store, maybe even the first year, I'm not sure. They left because they needed more hours than I could afford. I remember them being with me when I found the location and being by my side when I signed the lease. The day the store closed in 2008, Kevin gave me the nicest hug of the day and told me I did a good job. They were also present when a representative from a credit card processing company set me up to take plastic. As he began explaining how to run credit cards and keep sales records, Brian and Kevin zoned out. They looked at each other and without a word, as if telepathically, got up, walked out of the retail space into the storage area to play darts. They were so tight then, I think they could read each other's mind. The credit card guy said to me, "I guess you can explain it to them later." My favorite Brian moment is from the second time our band toured in the summer of 1994. Brian had just finished high school. We were in New England somewhere around Connecticut, very late at night. I was driving. It was Brian's job to keep me awake. He had a slingshot and was shooting at signs and trees on the side of the road. Between shots, we spoke. I asked Brian what he would like to do with his life now that he had finished high school. "I think I'd like to be an engineer," he said. This was a side of Brian I'd never seen, rather serious-minded. I was impressed. "Oh," I asked, "what kind of engineer?" Brian paused, weighed the question, and said, "The kind that drives a train." As if there was any other kind. After Kevin and Brian left, I had a couple of other short-term employees. And then I ended up with a couple of guys who stayed with me for about 10 years, Sam and Pete. And Sam and Pete can't be here today, but their parents are here. So this is about Sam and Pete, the brothers. Sam and Pete are brothers who worked at my record store. I never had a brother, only two sisters. I watched Sam and Pete's interactions with interest, the way Diane Fossey watched the apes. They could fling the poop. Sam and Pete, that is. I'm not sure about the apes. Pete is the younger brother, but he discovered the store first. Shortly after the place opened in 1995, I was hanging out with a customer about my age when we spotted 3 or 4 teenagers walking across the parking lot towards the store. Great, I thought, new customers. I needed them. Just as I was thinking this, my friend said, "You have to watch out for these kids. They're trouble. They'll rob you blind." They did look a little shifty. So that first time Pete and his buddies were in the shop, I watched them like a hawk. They were not trouble. They were just kids with funny haircuts. But to be safe, I watched them the next couple of times. No problems at all. I am not sure what information my friend was basing his theory on. Actually, Pete was trouble, but never for me. He had a bad temper and often got in hot water at school for acting out. I recall a story about him throwing something at a teacher and getting expelled. When Pete was good in school, his mom would reward him by bringing him to the record shop and letting him pick out something. And that's how I met Mrs. W., a very patient, understanding woman. One year around Christmas, Mrs. W. came in with Sam's wish list. There was an especially offensive title on the list. I didn't want to show it to her, but I figured I'd let her be the judge. I pulled the item from the shelf and handed it to her for her perusal. I watched her slowly evaluate the item before shaking her head and saying, "As a mother, I can't bring myself to buy this." Those were her exact words. I completely understood and reshelved it at once, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Pete went home and told Sam that there was a record store a few miles away that sold only punk rock stuff and skateboards. "Bullshit," said Sam. "There's no store like that in Brandon." A little while later, Sam walked in, froze 3 feet from the front door, threw his arms over his head and exclaimed, "This place is awesome!" He had a long green mohawk. He was wearing a dog collar around his neck. His voice had not changed yet. It was somewhere between Minnie Mouse and Pee Wee Herman. I automatically deemed him the most annoying person on earth and hoped I'd never see him again. Funny how things worked out, because Sam and Pete became two of my best customers, and within a year, when I needed new help, Sam was the first person I thought of. I had the phone numbers and addresses for most of my best customers from a contest I held at the store. I dug through the contest forms until I found Sam's, called him, and offered him a part-time job. His hamster-like squeals seemed to say, You had me at, "Is this Sam?" If I had known about Sam's inability to do anything in a timely manner, I probably never would have called him, but I didn't know. And by the time I figured it out, it felt like I was stuck with that lovable goofball. Around this time, Sam finished high school and started college. Somehow I ended up typing almost all of his college papers. I think it was because I could not stand to watch him type so slowly. Also around this time, Pete started working at the shop. Pete was a great worker when he could get to the shop, but the thing is, Pete never learned how to drive. He couldn't come to work until he found a ride each day. Sometimes it took him so long to find a ride that by the time he got to work, there was nothing left for him to do. Pete is now in his 30s and has something like 3 master's degrees, but a driver's license, no. Yeah. How many degrees does he have?
I think just the one.
Just one? I thought he had 2 or 3. He's been in college for a really long time. 20 years in college? Something like that. At least 10, right? I remember one time Sam and Pete got into a fight in the parking lot. It was basically a bunch of name-calling and wild swings. Sam broke one of his fingers on Pete's head and didn't get it set. It healed crooked, like an old witch's finger. The DOA album Hardcore 81 was a staple on the shop stereo. The brothers were just as nutty about DOA as I was. We all had our favorite songs, but we gravitated towards this album. One day we were sitting around talking about DOA's general excellence and came up with the idea of doing a tribute band. We started with a list of about 30 songs and eventually narrowed it down to a more realistic 13. Pete would be our Joey Shithead, playing guitar and singing. Sam would be our Randy Rampage on the bass, and I was to play the part of punk rock drum god Chuck Biscuits. As we discovered, it was a tough act to follow, or imitate, I guess. One day, when Joey Shithead called to sell records to the shop, I mentioned that we were starting a tribute band. He was humbly delighted. Through a series of phone calls and emails, Joey clarified a few lyrics we couldn't figure out, and I think he might have given us the chords to at least one song. But the coolest part was when he sent us a bunch of DOA promo photos so that we could get just the right look for the band. We only practiced a few times because band practice with the brothers was never easy. Sibling bickering. There was a lot of name-calling, particularly dickhead, and arguing about how to play the songs. We dubbed our tribute band Fucked Up Baby after the DOA song, naturally. We included that number in our set, as well as Nazi Training Camp, My Old Man's a Bum, I Don't Give a Shit, Race Riot, The Ballad of Kenny Blister, Tits on the Beach, Disco Sucks, The Prisoner, of course, and a few more. Pete insisted on making real belches for the song I Don't Give a Shit, which made practicing it more than once or twice in a row very difficult. Pete expertly mimicked Joey's trademark side-to-side head bobbing, and Sam did his best to be the maniac that is Randy Rampage. And I gained enormous respect for Chuck Biscuits. Some of the songs we could just never get right. We had Woke Up Screaming on our set list, but we could but we cut it before the show because it was just not coming together for us. I asked Joey Shithead about that. He told me that while it is a slow song, it is a hard one to play. The secret, he told me, was not to rush it, to find the groove. We never found the right groove. Show day came, and we got into wardrobe secretly as to not spoil the surprise. We were decked out in our best flannel, bandanas, and jeans. Sam wore my old motorcycle boots. I donned a bushy blonde wig. We looked great, and we sounded pretty good too. Unfortunately, there's only one photo from this night, and I do not have a copy. A week or so after the show, I spoke to Joey Shithead on the phone. I told him that it went well, and I mailed him a copy of the flyer. He thanked me and said it looked really cool.